Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast, where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. And today, we're going to talk about the Magic versus Nets Summer League game, where the Magic dropped to 0-4 through these Summer League games. And then we're just kind of going to talk about a bunch of different perspectives around the Orlando Magic's offseason, going from John Morant, who reacted to Desmond Bane being traded, Jalon Suggs, who finally shared his thoughts on joining this team after being injured for most of last year, and Grant Hill, former Orlando Magic forward, who believes that Paolo Banchero and this team has the chance to come out of the East this upcoming season. With all that being said, let's get right into today's episode. So, again, the Orlando Magic fall to 0-4 after a 90-94 loss to the Nets, who were led by Danny Wolf and Yegor Demon, who, as two rookie forwards or rookie guard combos, were able to combine for 32 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists from Danny Wolf, none from Yegor Demon. Were a +7 combined together in a game where, once again, the Orlando Magic fall to a pretty substantial, their deficit, and then are able to storm back in a real way, but just couldn't get the job done in the end. In this game, Jace Richardson and Tristan Da Silva did not play. Noah Pinda did return to the lineup. Finished with him and Wendell Moore both finished with 17 points. Noah Pinda also had 6 rebounds, and he had 3 assists in the game. 1 block. So, again, kind of sticks with the theme of us having at least 1 to 2 stocks per game. And I'm not going to lie to you. The best way for me to look at the outlook for this Orlando Magic's preseason, right? Because the goal for preseason, especially when you're a team like this one, when you're the Orlando Magic or the Chicago Bulls, where like you're not having success in the win column in summer league, and you're still looking for optimism. I think the optimistic point is that I think Jace Richardson is ready. I think Tristan Da Silva is ready. I think that's why they were not in this game in particular. I think they both reflected that in terms of what their skill set is supposed to bring to the table: 3-point spacing, on-ball creation. I think they both brought exactly what they needed to in order to show that they were ready to be able to translate properly. That's not to say that Noah Pinda didn't, but I think being able to see his on-ball chops as an offensive creator in this game was the only thing we hadn't been able to see at full capacity in the games prior. I think Noah Pinda was able to do a lot more with the ball in his hands in this situation. I feel like he was a lot more free in terms of being able to operate as the lead ball handler for this team. And I think that we got a full Noah Pinda experience in ways that, although the 9-14 start in their debut game, right, would have been a very good jump off point, I think his ability to get a lot of the things he wanted in this game was huge. I think one of the most important ones, 2 of 4 from beyond the arc. Of course, that's not high volume, and I don't think that he's going to be a guy that ever shoots more than 3 to 5 a game in the immediate future. I don't think this is a guy that's going to be a legitimate 3-and-D wing. I think, if I remember saying properly going into Summer League, the comp that you want a guy like Noah Pinda to chase after is the former version, the early Philadelphia 76ers version of what Ben Simmons was. Now, defensively, that might be pretty hard. That was an all-NBA caliber defender, top 3, top 5 DPOY finisher type of guy. But offensively, in terms of what he brings to the table as a facilitator, an on-ball threat, a guy who can operate in the transition game, big-time rebounder for his size and position, those things were shown in the first game, and I think that he really needs to build on that and really needed an opportunity to build more as an on-ball threat. I think one of the most important things, too, is identifying the point-forward aspects of a guy like Noah Pinda, because that's a special aspect of what the Orlando Magic are trying to tap into between Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero, and then being able to double down on that with guys like Tristan Da Silva and Noah Pinda. I think that puts them in a really good position where you have these big wing ball handlers that are able to make good decisions with the ball, score at will, create for others. Like, these are the type of things that they want. Dribble, pass, shoot is the philosophy of the Oklahoma City Thunder. If you go back to what their last handful of drafts were, they transitioned away from, if you're an athlete, we can teach you how to play basketball, right? That was the old model. That's how like the Hamidou Diallos were drafted once upon a time. It was this idea of if we can get a hyper athlete and teach him how to play within a system, he can be dangerous because he has physical tools that says he's going to be able to play at a high level. He just needs the structure. They slowly but surely transition. This is where guys like Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams come into account, J-Dub, of can you dribble, pass, shoot, make good decisions, and do you have good intangibles that then we can then build around within our scheme to take advantage of those tangibles while also knowing that you're a high IQ player. I think Noah Pinda follows that philosophy in a real way, and I think that the Oklahoma City Thunder are a good model to follow as the Orlando Magic in terms of specifically drafting at the forward position. Given the structure of your team, your main guys are Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero, and you want to be able to create depth that mimics, as closely as nearly possible, of course, mimics the ability of your main stars. That's the way you're able to create an ever-flowing offense regardless of who it is on the floor, where there's not this significant drop-off from when your all-star guys are on the floor to when your backup dudes step on. Of course, from a talent perspective, there's going to be a dip, but from a play style perspective, this is notable with the Golden State Warriors. There's a play style perspective change where when Steph Curry's on the floor, offense flows relatively well, if not elite. When Steph Curry comes off the floor, for the last 4 to 5 years, Golden State Warriors fans and regular NBA fans alike have been saying it's almost like Steve Kerr doesn't know how to coach unless Curry's on the floor, because it seems like no backup point guard is able to necessarily thrive in any kind of contributing way behind Steph when he's not on the floor. That's an issue that you obviously want to eliminate, or at least dissipate as much as humanly possible if you're the Orlando Magic, by getting more ball handling opportunities for guys like Tristan da Silva and like Noah Pinda. So although it has not been a productive summer league from the perspective of wins and losses, which of course does not matter in the grand scheme of things, I think when it comes to from a talent development standpoint, the Orlando Magic has seen and received exactly what it is they're looking for, and you have to be happy about that, because at the end of the day, the goal is to see these guys play on the big squad and hopefully be contributors in a real way. And so far, throughout the summer league, when they have played, the skill sets have translated to this is something that we can ask them to do on the main stage, and they'll be able to produce in a real way that does contribute around the guys that are going to be their teammates on a consistent basis, as opposed to the guys obviously on Summer League. Majority of them outside of Jace Richardson, Tristan da Silva, and Noah Pinda are fighting for roster spots across the league, not just for the Magic. And watch out for Skal Labissiere too. I think he's going to be an interesting guy. Maybe he's a guy that I end up touching on in a different podcast episode, but he could be an interesting two-way guy for this roster as well. So just kind of throwing his name out there on the back half of that. I'll do a deeper dive on Skal Labissiere in a different episode, but he could be an interesting two-way guy, especially given the fact that since we're still struggling with getting forward/center depth right now, that doesn't involve like significant trade value of having to add like other picks we don't really have and things of that nature. Skal Labissiere could be a very solid pickup on that two-way contract because he's played relatively well. I don't think the game against the Nets was a good representation of how active he's actually been as a rim runner and defender so far during Summer League. Next, we're going to move on to Ja Morant, who finally shares his thoughts on the Desmond Bane trade. Obviously, he was his partner in crime in the backcourt for the last 3 to 4 seasons, and him being traded was a big deal. And so with that being said, the exact thing that Ja Morant said was, I was shocked personally. I got the message from Des. To see it all over the internet, I thought it was fake, honestly. It's best for both sides. Des is going to a very talented Orlando team. I feel like he's the piece that they've been missing. Now, he doesn't touch on the part where it's best for both sides, only the part that is best for Desmond Bane and the Orlando Magic. So maybe he's looking at it from a business perspective of being able to acquire first-round draft picks down the line and things of that nature, and saying, hey, the Memphis Grizzlies are establishing something where they can continue to build from internally, right, from the inside, the way they've been one of the best player development organizations in the league for the last 2 to 3 years. I think that it's interesting that John Morant feels as though he's the missing piece because I feel like a lot of people are in the camp of feeling like Desmond Bane is starting to slowly but surely become a luxury item. And I can understand that to a certain extent. You see what Jace Richardson brings to the table. You understand what Anthony Black is. You look at the fact that they were able to bring in Tyus Jones. You ask yourself, okay, the guard depth is there. Desmond Bane is just another knockdown three-point shooter. Yes, he can average 20 points per game. Yes, he can handle the ball. Yes, he's a relatively scrappy defender. But, like, was the juice worth the squeeze? And again, that goes back to similarly what you asked about Mikal Bridges. And I think I said this in a past episode in relating the Desmond Bane trade to Mikal Bridges. The Desmond Bane trade being a win is going to show in a game or a handful of games where he just has an outstanding performance that without his contribution, it was going to lead to a significant loss or it was going to lead to a much different outcome as opposed to how the game could have been won, right? A game that's won 98-102 could have been won 114-106 if it's not a great example, but what I'm trying to say is, for example, the two back-to-back games against the Boston Celtics where the game ends with Mikal Bridges getting a rip steal on Jaylen Brown and a big-time block on Jason Tatum to end the games and help the New York Knicks win those games in the series against the Boston Celtics. Those are games where Mikal Bridges shines and you say, that's why we traded for Mikal Bridges. That's the same thing that I think for Desmond Bane is going to account for specifically in postseason play, because I think that's where it's most important, right? You don't trade for a guy like Desmond Bane with that kind of draft capital unless your expectation is that he's going to shine in the postseason. There's going to be a game where Desmond Bane has 25, 27 points, hits 6 or 7 threes, has good defensive acumen, and has a couple of big-time stops in the fourth quarter, and you're going to say this game was won by Desmond Bane's contribution, right? And I think that's where the missing piece title is so important because I feel like sometimes we look at these teams. I'm going to use a lot of references in this episode because I think that's a good way to kind of like make a stronger understanding of some of the different things I'm talking about for this team. For example, you look at the Toronto Raptors team that won the championship and you say Kawhi Leonard was the missing piece. A lot of people could look back at that Toronto Raptors team and say, well, you get rid of Dwayne Casey and you get rid of DeMar DeRozan in a year where the Eastern Conference significantly took a hit because LeBron James goes to the West, heads to the Los Angeles Lakers. And you ask yourself, could they have won the championship had DeMar DeRozan still been there, Dwayne Casey still been there, as opposed to bringing in Nick Nurse and Kawhi Leonard? And a lot of people's answers would casually maybe be yes, but then a lot of people would look at the 2019 run of Kawhi Leonard and say, they couldn't do that without him because if you look at the multitude of different opportunities that he had, the multi ball bounce win over the Philadelphia 76ers, obviously big time performances in the series against the Golden State Warriors in the championship round, right? That's the missing piece. It's the intangible aspect. DeMar DeRozan was a 25-point per game scorer. Dwayne Casey was a high-level defensive-minded coach at the time. But what Nick Nurse brought to the table offensively for the Toronto Raptors, what Kawhi Leonard brought to the table as a takeover guy in postseason play, that's what changed the dynamic of the Toronto Raptors, where you can go back and listen to interviews from guys that played on that team, Kyle Lowry, Serge Ibaka, Pascal Siakam, and say, when that guy, Fred VanVleet said it more specifically, when that guy stepped into the building, you just knew that they had a chance to win the championship. And I think the similar thing can be said about Desmond Bane, obviously not on the same caliber, but when you talk about the phrasing of missing pieces, it's about that intangible, that skill set, that next level gear that the team is not used to, that this player injects into the squad and brings a different dynamic from day one. Desmond Bane is a not polar opposite, but he is a antithesis to a certain degree of what Jalen Suggs is, specifically as an on-ball creator. His development coming out of TCU and growth as a player offensively on ball with Memphis, particularly in that year where John Morant missed a lot of time, that was a reflection of the fact that he could be an on-ball takeover guy on the perimeter, something that the Orlando Magic have not had. I think that this being Desmond Bane's acquisition will go down as one of the more underrated pickups of this summer a year or two from now when we see what the Orlando Magic are able to produce on the floor over the next 2 to 3 seasons, specifically in the postseason. So I think that Ja Morant, I think he hit the nail on the head on this one. Obviously, you want to see Desmond Bane shine in the position that he's in if you're Ja Morant, given a chance to have more of a winning opportunity to a certain degree when you just factor in just East versus West and the Orlando Magic just being really well built right now. But with that being said, man, I mean, there's not too much more to go into about this one, but I do think that I hope my references make sense as well when I talk about how important the Desmond Bane trade actually is. Desmond Bane does fill a role that the Orlando Magic desperately needed, despite the depth that they've grown through just the last few postseason moves with Jones and Richardson, and Noah Penda to a lesser degree, given his on-ball ability as a big-time, combo forward type. I think Desmond Bane still brings an element that's very important to what the Orlando Magic need to do in order to be a championship caliber team in the upcoming season. Next, let's move up to Jalen Suggs, who's excited to play with this team. Speaking of Desmond Bane being one of the better acquisitions, Jalen Suggs now is more than enthusiastic about going into next season with the kind of squad that the Orlando Magic have built over the course of the summer. He says, the sky's the limit. I think obviously everybody's mindset is going on to win the championship. You hate to see guys go down, but there's opportunity in the East, and I think everyone recognizes it. So everyone's prepping for it. We're all on the same page, and we're excited to start the year. Brings a different energy. You got to think, man. Jalen Suggs played 35 games last year, and this team almost won 50 without him on the floor. Not only should he be excited for being able to play next to Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero, who will hopefully continue to develop as offensive and defensive caliber guys and grow into all-star caliber dudes next season. Obviously, Paulo Banchero's already made one. But now you add Tyus Jones, fellow Minnesota native. You add Desmond Bane. You still have Goga Batazde. You still have Wendell Carter. You have Tristan Da Silva. You know what I mean? You still have Anthony Black. Jalen Suggs is not coming back to the team he once played on last season. This squad is revamped, re-energized, and put in a position to really establish themselves as a force in the Eastern Conference. This team was one of the more lethal offensive teams in a short spurt of time when Jalen Suggs was on the floor. And they were one of the elite defenses last year, regardless of all the injuries that they did sustain. Jalen Suggs, just as the rest of the front office sees for the Orlando Magic and a lot of the other teams around the Eastern Conference, understands the opportunity that has been created within the Eastern Conference. It's very simple. Like I said, Jalen Suggs is not coming back to the same squad that he once played for 35 games last year. This team is better. They're more developed. They're deeper. This team has the chance to grow even further with their camaraderie being established even further. Jalen Suggs has a right to be excited about what's coming up for this season. He's going to be the lead point guard for this team. All the moves this summer indicated that they're not trying to get a guy to replace him. That's what Anthony Simons would have been. That's what trading for LaMelo Ball would have been, right? That's what trading for Darius Garland would have indicated, right? He's been given the keys. They gave Jalen Suggs the keys with the moves that they made this summer. You're putting guys around him. You get a backup point guard in Tyus Jones. That's just to help sustain your depth in case Jalen Suggs goes down with injury again. You get a two-guard in Desmond Bane who can be an offensive generator. Jace Richardson can operate off the ball and operate as a two-guard, despite the fact that he does operate a little bit better with the ball. But Jalen Suggs can step off ball and be a spread pick-and-roll guy who operates in three-point shooting opportunities, floats around the three-point perimeter line, and just waits for Jace Richardson to kick out. Waits for Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner to kick out, right? Jalen Suggs is going to be coming to a situation where he can be the lead point guard for a team where he can also get his offense a lot easier than he's ever gotten it since being drafted by the Magic. This should be a special season for Jalen Suggs. I think he has the opportunity to be once again, first team, second team, all defensive capabilities. And I think that Jalen Suggs is going to average 15, 5, and 4. 15, 5, and 4, 16, 16-5-4, somewhere around there. And I would not be surprised if he's back floating around 38, 39% from three. And we want to see that number around 6, 7, 8 attempts per game. But Jalen Suggs is walking into a really solid situation. Coming off of a year last year where he didn't get to experience the squad nearly as much. The team has only gotten better since the last time he was on the floor with this team. And now he has as much full reign as there can possibly be, because coming into this season, the Orlando Magic front office showed that they believe in him as their lead guard. They just need more help in the three-point shooting department to add next to him, and the defensive department to add next to him, in order to further build around those two star forwards, obviously, that he's going to be feeding the ball to a bunch this next upcoming season. And let's finish off with our, at this point it's becoming a regular segment on the podcast of the joining the Orlando Magic hype train from ESPN analysts and other NBA analysts across, different platforms. Former Orlando Magic forward Grant Hill shared his thoughts on the Orlando Magic, saying that he believes that Paolo Banchero at the helm, with what they've done this offseason, should be the catalyst to a breakout season coming out of the East for the Magic this upcoming year. He says they've been in this sort of situation they're in for the past few years, a playoff team first round. But I think bringing in Desmond Bane, what they've done this offseason, they were decimated by injuries throughout the season last year, but you got an incredible young player in Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner as well. They've also, I'll go to the quote beforehand. Jamal Mosley is a fantastic coach, so they are like Detroit, or a team that can maybe leapfrog over some teams in front of them in the polls and be one of the top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference next season. They've always been able to defend, and that's been their calling card. But shooting was a challenge for them the last few years. You bring in one of the best long-distance shooters in Bane, and so this team got better. The expectations are much, much greater for the Magic this upcoming season. I want to touch on a specific sentence he phrased, which he relays to the Detroit Pistons, of saying, like Detroit, or a team that can leapfrog over some teams in the front of them in the polls, and at one point be, a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference. One, the Orlando Magic have overachieved expectations before. That was 2 seasons ago. The season prior, they actually finished as a top flight team in comparison to the expectations coming into the year. Expectations are higher this year, though, of course. But he said it, and we've been saying it. You have Paolo. You have Franz. You have Jalen Suggs. You add Desmond Bane, who's a high-level three-point shooter. You add Tyus Jones, who's a high-level three-point shooter and a guy who could command an offense. Jamal Mosley continues to develop as a coach, and he builds a coaching staff that focuses on player development and offensive creativity, if you go back to some of the coaching hires that have been made over the last couple of weeks, as we discussed on a previous episode, bringing in guys like Gasham God. This team has geared itself up to go on a run. What kind of run? Eastern Conference Finals, NBA championship run? That's a different episode on exactly like what the realistic, expectations are. That's a different episode. And it'll be an episode that makes a lot more sense, more likely once we've seen this team on the floor for a few months, of what really this team should amount to. But on paper, and what this team has done organizationally over the last 2 months to build around Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, paying Paolo Banchero, locking that in, having this core 4 locked in for the next 4 to 5 seasons. Grant Hill understands the nuances of the game in terms of building around a superstar, one, yes. I think he also understands the opportunity within the Eastern Conference, as we just touched on with the Jalen Suggs segment, of this team is built to be able to take advantage of some of the disadvantages floating around the league right now. The Orlando Magic are going to be the new it kid of the NBA. There's always a team every single season that becomes that team that everybody's fascinated about because they're playing above expectations, right? Last year, Detroit was that team. At one point, the Atlanta Hawks were that team. The light the beam year, the Sacramento Kings were that team. There's always going to be that it kid who plays above expectations because they make a couple of moves in the summer that make you think, you know what, bro? This team might low-key be kind of fire. This team might be kind of nice. And I think the Orlando Magic are going to be that team. Not only would I be surprised if this team gets more on-air coverage from places like ESPN, but I would not be surprised if a lot more ESPN and other NBA analysts start riding the wave even further of picking the Orlando Magic to come out the East once we're 2 to 3 months deep into the season. But with that being said, this is another episode of the Magic Latest Podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily content, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace.